Hi there, today I've prepared for you a very special lesson where I'll show you how to analyze and describe different types of graphs, charts, and maps in your IELTS writing test. You'll learn how to write your overview, what kind of vocabulary you should use, how to compare things and much more. So let's get started. Let me begin with some statistics. Every year thousands of students take the IELTS exam all around the world and many of them fail the writing test. Now have a look at this pie chart. Can you guess what the biggest problem is? That's right, it's task 2. Many candidates spend most of their time practicing argumentative or opinion-based essays and they assume that these kinds of tasks carry more weight with the examiner. But the truth is that both tasks are equally important. You get 50% of your writing score for task 1 where you need to analyze and describe various types of visual data and 50% for task 2. However, before we move on, I should let you know that in this lesson we'll focus on task 1. If you're interested in learning a few secrets of writing a brilliant task 2 essay, you can watch this lesson here. Now back to task 1. The worst thing that can happen is if you perform poorly on this part of the exam because examiners read only the first 140 words of your answer in the overview. This means that if your introduction isn't good enough, the examiner will get a poor impression of your writing skills and will probably not bother reading the rest of your essay. Not only that, but task 1 is the first writing task you do in your exam. If you don't feel confident doing it, you'll start to panic and that won't help your performance in task 2 either. There are 4 types of tasks in IELTS writing, each with its own type of visual data. Let's have a look at them now. First of all, line graphs illustrate changes over time. You may be given a line graph with 2 sets of data, as you can see here. In this case, the chart shows the average consumption of 3 nutrients by adults in the UK. Take a close look at the title. It tells you exactly what the graph is about. Then pay attention to the labels on the axis. The horizontal axis represents the type of nutrient, which are the independent variables in this case. And the vertical axis shows the amount of nutrient per person per day, which are the dependent variables. Also, notice the scale. Here the amounts are measured in milligrams. In this graph, you can clearly see the differences between the 3 nutrients. Fiber has the highest amounts, while sugars have the lowest. As you can see, the lines on the graph are straight and continuous. However, in this line graph, the population is divided into 2 genders, men and women. Notice the dotted lines. They indicate that data is missing for males in 1992 and 1996. There are many ways to analyze the information on a line graph. For example, you could discuss the differences you observe between the lines or examine the development over time. Here is a good starting sentence for your report. The line graph provides data on the daily intake of fats, carbohydrates and fibers by adults in the United Kingdom during the period from 1990 to 2010. The next type of task is presented in this bar chart. The bars in the chart represent various categories. For example, these ones compare the salaries offered for different university degrees in the UK. As you can see, the higher the level of education, the higher the salary. Notice the title and the labels. The title is quite self-explanatory, whereas the labels on the axis need a bit more attention. On the horizontal axis, you can see the degree level. The bars labeled bachelor's and master's include all the subjects studied at these levels. This is called a group or a category. On the vertical axis, you can see the annual salary in thousands of Great British pounds. At the top of the chart, there is a scale with the minimum and maximum values. This is useful when you want to describe the extremes in your report. One thing I'd like you to pay attention to is the gap between the bars. It shows the difference between each pair of categories. It doesn't matter which side of the chart the gaps are on, they still indicate the difference between the groups. Here is a good way to introduce a bar chart. The bar chart compares the starting salaries offered to graduates in the United Kingdom in 2013 for a range of different undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Another common type of task is a table. It organizes data into rows and columns. The information in a table may be presented in numbers, percentages, or even words. This table compares student enrollment at 3 universities in 2015 and predicts it for 2025. To analyze the data, you should find the main trends and differences. For example, you could talk about the highest or lowest numbers. These are the extremes and they are usually located somewhere on the edges of the table. The table shows that in 2015, the highest number of students was enrolled at the University of Sydney and the lowest at the University of Adelaide. Look at these prefixes. They are used to refer to the size of numbers. Mega describes extremely large numbers, giga is also used to refer to huge figures, while kilo means thousand. In academic writing, you should avoid vague words like big and small. Instead, use formal alternatives like substantial, significant, moderate, or slight. It is also important to pay attention to the verbs you use when talking about data. In this sentence, the verb enroll is used in the passive voice. It's appropriate when the action is more important than the agent. We can also use the active voice. The active voice is more direct and personal. Here are a few more examples. Notice how we use different verbs to describe the data. In a pie chart, you can see the proportions of something. This pie chart illustrates how 15-year-olds spend their time in Australia. It shows the percentage of time spent on different activities. The whole circle represents 100%. Each slice of the pie shows the proportion of time spent on a particular activity. The biggest slice indicates the largest proportion. It takes up 28% of the circle. The smallest one shows the least amount of time. Only 4% of the time is spent on cultural activities. Here is a good opening sentence for your report. The pie chart illustrates the proportion of time spent on different activities by 15-year-olds in Australia. Finally, let's look at maps. In this first map, you can see two different places. This is a before and after map. It shows how something changes over time. For example, this map illustrates changes to traffic in central London. There are many different elements in a map. Roads and routes are usually shown by lines. Places and locations are usually marked with dots or pins. Natural and man-made features are marked with symbols. When describing a map, you can talk about the location of features or how they have changed over time. This map illustrates the changes that have taken place in the city centre in London from 1990 to 2010. When writing your report, you should remember a few important things. First, never copy the question in your introduction. Try to paraphrase it. Use synonyms and change the structure of the sentence. One of the most common mistakes is using simple adjectives like big and small. Instead, try to use more academic vocabulary. Significant, substantial, moderate, or slight. Also, pay attention to the tenses you use. If you are describing past data, use the past tense. When discussing predicted figures, use future forms. Present tense is usually appropriate when describing maps or processes. When analyzing graphs or charts, you should summarize the main trends and differences. Don't go into detail and don't try to explain why something happened. This part of your report should be between 50 and 70 words. Write it after you've finished your overview and before you start your body paragraph. In your body paragraphs, you should describe the data in detail. Explain the most important trends and differences. Summarize the main points. Make sure to compare things when it's necessary. Your body paragraphs should take up about 2/3 of your report. To get a band 7 or above, you should demonstrate range in your vocabulary and grammar. Use complex sentences and link ideas together using connectors like while, whereas, although, and in contrast. Connectors add clarity to your writing. They help the reader follow your ideas and they show how different ideas are related. The following table shows the advantages of using connectors in your writing. And finally, let me show you a typical structure for writing your Task 1 report. First of all, you have your introduction. It should include the overview. In the introduction, you shouldn't describe the data. Instead, summarize the main trends and patterns. Then write your body paragraphs. They should explain the data in detail. Compare things and summarize the main points. The body paragraphs usually take up 2/3 of your answer. Some Task 1 reports might have a conclusion, but generally it's not required. If you have enough time, you can write a conclusion. It should briefly summarize the main trends and patterns. You can also mention any conclusions drawn in the task. So to sum up, Task 1 is really important. It's worth preparing for just like Task 2. You have to analyze different types of data, select and transform information, present it in a clear and concise way and do all that under exam pressure. To practice and improve your writing skills, check the description below for useful resources. Thank you for watching today and see you in the next videos. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye.